Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks and meet the Grom. This is the new highest damage per minute premium tank in the game. It's a tier 8 Polish premium tank destroyer that is designed to just dump on whatever is stupid enough to try and fight it in close quarters combat. It has the very weird looking barrel that you have on the Polish tank destroyers for what we're giving a calling, I think, star tray shells. And this vehicle is kind of like having the tier 10 Polish tank destroyer dropping down at tier 8 and competing with the Polish tier 8 regular tank destroyer, the Kilana. This vehicle, like the other Polish tank destroyers, is capable of doing 800 damage, but only up to 50 meters. Beyond that, if you can't manage to penetrate the high explosive rounds, your damage drop-off is going to go down to a pathetic 200 when you're engaging targets that are at 500 meters. So this is a famine or feast all-in close quarters combat vehicle, and then today I'm going to be letting you know whether it's worth trying to get your hands on this, as it's coming into the game in an old school mission marathon. So you'll be able to get this one for cheap if you're willing to play a substantial amount of World of Tanks over the next couple of weeks. So let's see how the Grom stacks up compared to the tier 8 tech tree Polish tank destroyer, the Kilana. And firstly, I want to show you that the Kilana is a very good tank. It has actually got the best win ratio difference and the best raw win ratio of any of the tier 8 tank destroyers. And so that means that if the Grom can compete with the Kilana, this is looking like it's going to be a very powerful tank. So immediately we notice that the Grom has a significant damage per minute advantage over the Kilana at 3,000, the new highest damage per minute available on any premium tank inside the game. However, next you'll notice that at 500 meters, the Grom's damage drop-off is just absolutely huge. The alpha damage goes from 800 at 50 meters down to 200 at 500 meters. So this means that unlike the Kilana, where it only loses half of its damage over distance, the Grom is losing literally 75% of its damage. And so at 500 meters, the Kilana nearly has double the damage per minute and double the alpha damage of the Grom, making that better for those more flexible situations, whereas the Grom is more of the just go in and fight in close quarters combat, famine or feast kind of tank. It's really shocking how much damage the Grom stacks up quickly with that damage per minute and with 800 alpha damage at 50 meters. It's just a very inflexible tank within that regard. You have more than enough ammunition to dominate all of the tanks inside the entire matchup. 1,400 meters a second shell velocity on its regular rounds, and it has 1,600 on its premium rounds, meaning that you have great sniping capacity, but you're not going to want to snipe, right? So I guess really that shell velocity just helps you making those shots at moving targets even at close quarters distances. So gun handling wise, the Grom has better aim time and much better dispersion values when it's turning the turret and slightly better when moving, but it does have bad accuracy at 0.4. But still, the gun handling felt decent on this tank while I was playing it. You never really felt like I was having to aim quite as long as I was having to with the Kilana. Tank has the same 7 degrees of gun depression as the Kilana, and it also has a horrible gun arc, only 5 degrees to the left and 5 degrees to the right. This is going to frustrate a lot of you out there. When you play this tank, you are going to have to turn the vehicle because the gun can only wiggle a little bit to the left and the right. It's one of the most annoying things about the Polish tank destroyers, and it will take some getting used to. And even after playing hundreds of games at the tier 10, playing the Błyczkawice, it still annoys me how narrow these gun arcs are. One thing that's great about the Grom is the mobility. The power to weight is better than the Kilana. The ground resistances are better than the Kilana on medium and soft. I mean, you could get away without off-road driving, but I would probably still recommend it. The top speed at 45 kilometers an hour allows you to just go further, faster. It's just a better mobility tank compared to the Kilana. Now, the armor on this thing is troll. Wargaming say it's got 170, while the Kilana has 200, but this isn't exactly the case, because as we see on the front of the Grom, it's got 195 on the upper hull, meaning that this vehicle has about 260 millimeters of effective upper hull armor. The sides become 300 until you turn, and then they're quite weak. The problem with this tank is it has this bad 100 millimeters all along this part of the upper hull, which is easily penetrated by every single tank this vehicle is going to meet. Accordingly, what you want to do is always be using your gun depression in this tank and trying to hide this plate. The Kilana doesn't really have so much of that kind of a problem, because we can see it's still got 200 millimeters along here. So this means that with the Kalana, you don't have to nearly hide so much of the lower plate as you will do with the Grom. But it's something that I'm willing to sacrifice to be able to get that mobility. Just like with the Kalana and all of the other Polish tank destroyers, it's really annoying to be overmatched here by all 76mm caliber guns, and the Grom is no exception. You're going to get overmatched by actually 61mm guns here, because it looks like it's a bit more similar to the Błyczkawica within that regard. Nevertheless, this is still tremendous hull armor, and I was able to get away with a lot, especially with face-hugging opponents that just couldn't be able to deal with it. It also has practically no cupolas, so as soon as you are using any of that kind of gun depression, you're going to have no weak points on the top of your tank that are exposed. However, the Grom doesn't have the largest amount of hit points, unlike the Kalana, so it does feel like it can't go quite as far. And this vehicle also has worse camo rating than the Kalana, and it has bad view range at 350, meaning that you aren't spotting for yourself at great distances unless you definitely take coated optics or binoculars. Crew-wise, this vehicle has the same loadout as the Błyczkawica, so if you do like the Polish Tier 10 tank destroyer, then this is going to be a great crew trainer for you. Crew skills recommendations will be on the commander: brothers, repairs, concealment, recon, emergency, and coordination. For the radio operator skills, I recommend taking situational awareness, firefighting, and jamming on this vehicle. For your gunner skills, I'd recommend brothers, repairs, concealment, armorer. I like quick aiming on this vehicle to be able to gain a little bit of the gun arc and a tiny bit of the aim speed. You could take snapshot instead, but remember the dispersion values when turning the gun are not too bad. I wouldn't really recommend concentration because this vehicle isn't going to want to be sniping at decent distances. Designated target, again, not so useful because you don't really care about spotting people at decent distances for longer. All you really care about is just fighting in close quarters. And I like Deadeye on this tank because you got a big old shell, although the caliber is actually quite small. It's not very good for overmatching on any of these Polish tank destroyers, but the amount of crits and fires and ammo racks that I got with this was quite substantial. Driver skills: brothers, repairs, concealment. I like off-road driving, engineer, and clutch. Braking, the mad lads of you out there might want to take controlled impact. Smooth ride could help a little bit, but I feel the others I would prioritize over. For your loader skills: brothers, repairs, concealment, intuition so you can switch out to HE shells for decent distances, ammo tuning, and close quarters combat. However, be warned, you might lose a few ammo racks if you don't take safe stowage. I wouldn't really recommend Adrenaline Rush on this tank, but you could do if you're a mad lad instead of the intuition, for example, or even instead of the ammo tuning. I wouldn't recommend that because that's just a 1% alpha increase and penetration increase. Equipment-wise, I'm going to have two builds on this tank. Both are going to be using gun rammer and vents to maximize the damage per minute, and then I'm going to be using a turbo on this tank. An experimental turbo would be nice on this vehicle. For my second build, I'm going to be dropping that turbo for my close quarters combat maps, and I'm going to be using a durability device instead to keep my tracks on and to give me the health to be able to deal with whoever comes my way. Field mods wise, definitely take reinforced suspension, then take the accuracy on this vehicle, then take the view range on this vehicle, and for the bonus slot, I am going to be using a durability device because the gun rammer and vents will be working, and I'm not going to be inside both of those slots, and I'm not going to be taking coated optics. This vehicle isn't meant for long range, it's meant for close quarters combat. But I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's take the Grom out onto the battlefield. So firstly, we're going to be rolling out on San River, and there's a few different places which I could take a tank like this. I could go and do kind of like stereotypical sit at the back and snipe kind of play, or alternatively, I could try and make my way through towards the middle of the map and try to brawl out with some of the heavies that would make their way along there. The problem with positioning a vehicle in a place like that is that while you quite often will have it as like a linear fight, it's quite hard to push without isolating the enemy vehicles. And this tank, while it does have decent armor, as I showed, this whole part of like the mid plate is actually not very good at all. It looks like it's good. It's kind of like a bait actually on the front of the tank. You think that it's going to be strong there, but it's actually very weak. So when you do fight these tanks, do take into advantage, or take into account that that can give you an advantage by shooting towards that location. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and attack the north of this map, because to all intents and purposes, I might end up fighting 2 of the 4 medium tanks on the enemy team. And if some of the heavies do come up there, I should be able to pressure them. So the build that I'm going to be using is with the turbo, and you can see with the turbo this thing is fairly proficient with regards to its speed. Interestingly, I outspot that T-44, which is amazing considering that I have bad view range on this tank. So I guess maybe the T-44 just isn't using camo. We can see we hit for 650 51 there. Not a bad start. And I was thinking, like, let's plow, but then, suddenly M4Y above me, and also the STRV 81 there as well. I definitely can't push this. But you know what? If he pokes, I should be able to just go straight through the upper hull there. And take a look at that gun handling. It's definitely not bad on this tank. To have that little bit of an advantage over the Kalana with regards to the gun handling helps. And boy, nobody wants to get hit for 700 even at a distance like that. So a lot of you will be questioning, well, QB, how do you know how much damage you're actually going to do with your shots? Well, you'll notice that there's a little indicator in the right here on the screen, as you can see, and that shows you what the average damage you will deal with the shot will be. One of the interesting things that I just thought to myself is that I wonder if that takes into account shell tuning, because on average at 50 meters this tank with shell tuning should be doing about 808 or 809 average damage, because it's upping that lower end by 2%, which increases the overall alpha damage average of the vehicle by 1% on this tank. So we'll have to see when we are engaging tanks that are 50 meters whether that number will go up to 808 or 809, whether it's taking into account cruise skills or whether it's not taking into account cruise skills. So in this kind of a situation in the Grom, I basically just got to sit here. This is all I can really do in this situation. I can't push because I've got the two tanks on my right. There's not really too much that I can do. I just got to hope that the Super Pershing is going to make a mistake and just pre-aim in this scenario. I think about pushing forwards there when I see the CS-52 Lease make the power play. But yeah, no, it's not going to work. So just keep calm and just hold this position. And this is sometimes what you just got to do in your Polish tank destroyers, and the Grom is no exception. Just got to sit and wait and have the enemies push you, because these vehicles, they're not very flexible. They don't have a wide gun arc. They don't have that much gun depression. 7 degrees, it's not bad, but it's not great. And they're a bit cumbersome even as they're getting around because of that lack of gun arc. So for you to be able to hit your opponents, they'd have to be pretty bad. However, you know, if we just find the top of the tank, ooh, baby, 727, I'll take that. That's half the health off a tier 8 medium tank, and I'm not even at the optimal distance here of 50 meters and below to be able to engage this tank. And we can see the average that we'll be doing here is 700, so that was a little bit of a high roll against the Super Pershing. But that now means that when I go after that player, I'm kind of like a 6 out of 10 chance to destroy them with the next shot, if I can get within 50 meters. And this is really just the Grom in a nutshell. It sits, it holds, it doesn't have weak points. Of course, as I mentioned, this part of the vehicle is weak, the lower plate is weak as well. If they get your side, then these parts are going to be weak. But unless they've got like tier 9 or tier 10 gold rounds, in a matchup like this against tier 8s, there really aren't very many tier 8s that can contest this thing's armor. Even tier 8 tank destroyers will struggle trying to contest this vehicle's armor. So luckily for me, the Batchat 12T is actually making a bit of a crossplay here, and that means that now the Super Pershing is a guaranteed one-shot, but of course I'm going to have to be able to hit this shell to be able to remove them from the game. A lot of people will think that the Grom is boring, and yeah, I would agree with them. I think this kind of gameplay, it's definitely not super intelligent. It's kind of like you're playing a hold-down tank that doesn't have a turret, which means that your opportunity to be aggressive is reduced against multiple tanks. But of course, if you're fighting a single vehicle, you can go after it. And with the Batchat running away and baiting the STRV 81, I thought to myself, considering that this game's a 50-50 with regards to the other flank, I'm willing to take the fight here, and I'm going to go after them. I ask the Iron Arnie to help me out here, ask him twice, and I know I might take a hit from the M4Y. I'm going to just make sure that I try and stay just as far away from the Super Pershing's proxy spotting as possible, and easy money right through the lower plate of the Super Pershing. And now I was feeling good. I was feeling like, whoa, broken the camp, bounced 3 gold rounds from the Super Pershing, and maybe we can just crest the ridge up here to get the M4Y. And we're going to do something very awkward here, and that is, I want to try and get up this slope, but the slope's actually quite hard to get up here. But if I wiggle, oh no, come on, don't make this too awkward. Physics, how do they work? Well, luckily, the Grom does actually worm its way up the slope there, and I'm going to load a regular round even though I'm on a press account, just because I just feel good about not wasting credits even if it's on an account which has infinite credits. And we shut down the M4Y and now turn our attention to the possibility of an ISU 152K and a Stritzwagen 81 making their way up. So So we can see the S1 actually overmatches my plate there and damages my fuel tank. I'm pretty sure they shot up through the track and went up into the lower part of the hull that I showed you in the armor layout. And wow, I'm definitely getting my butt whooped now as the STRV hits me again. Let's go face hug this ISU and just pray that he sucks. Luckily he does. And who should I focus here? The S1 and hope that I don't low roll, or should I focus the ISU 152K? Well, I'll focus the STRV 81 and then I'll hope that the Iron Arnie will be able to hit the ISU 152K for me. But the ISU 152K is actually backing off right now, and my DPM makes even a scary tank like the ISU 152K look a little bit stupid right now. And I'm just trying to bait this guy. I bait him successfully. He loads gold. Gold isn't going to help you if you fire like that. Overkill ammo rack for 77 damage. And ladies and gents, boys and girls, that is how you club out 4,000 damage and 4 kills in a close quarters combat fight. So, all in all, it definitely wasn't kind of like the optimal situation to find yourself in a Grom, but it worked out. And boy, am I happy that we made our way through that flank. Because as we can see, our team, they're doing okay on the other flank, but they're definitely not winning. We can see the hit points, even with us vanquishing multiple vehicles there. By ourselves, pretty much. But with some good support from the Iron Arnie as well. We can see this game is still darn close. So I'm just racing away with this turbo, able to go at 50 kilometers an hour. If I have the engineering perk, I'm probably able to go at more like, yeah, 50 with the fact that this is just a regular turbo. No fancy bounty or bond equipment. So remember, if you do end up putting bounty or bond equipment on your Grom, it will be just even a little bit better than this. So I'm going to load HE here for the SU, and the HE shell will always do 800, but it doesn't matter if they're there, so to say. And now we go, well, as if they've got on low health is what I mean. Of course it matters where they are, but with the yeah, but it doesn't matter where they are with the HE. If it pens, it pens. It's still going to do 800. And we're just 65 meters from the T28 there. We can see it's going to do 780 on average, and we can see now that it does say 800. So it's interesting because even though it says that it's 800, we will actually be doing slightly more with that shell tuning, as I said. 6 kills now, up to a Top Gun and 5,000 damage. Just going to wait for the 252U to get out the way. And this vehicle, it is pretty just smorky in this kind of situation. Just grind in, get your face into your opponent. And if you do that, then yeah, the vehicle is just a ruthless death box of a tank, just getting around. And hopefully we can even manage to get our 7th kill here in the Grom, right through the side of the vehicle. And that is how you destroy half of the enemy team with 5,500 damage combined. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, this thing is absolutely brutal. So next up, we're going to be rolling out on Tundra. I'm going to be using a durability device this time. No turbo, as the map's quite small. What I want to show you in this replay is just how influential the Grom can be so early on in the game, and where I feel that if I can be influential early, then the game becomes more of a formality and my team are able to roll through the enemy. So the Grom, definitely not fast like medium tanks, but kind of like the slower ones, like the Guard, to be able to get into position. And so that generally means that you're probably going to be there faster than heavies. And when you're there in position, oh, dude, 860? It's just hard. He's even using a durability device, and that's over half of his tank. When you manage to get these shots in, it's just absolutely disgusting what the Grom is able to do. So I tried to sneak over there to see if we could be able to get the Basante. Unfortunately, I better help these guys out up on the hill. I take 449 hit points from that Scorpion G, though, at decent distances. And this is really just where the Grom has to be, in these kind of like knife fight, close quarters combat engagements. It can't do the sneaky long-range sniping like the Scorpion can. It's probably going to have less alpha damage than the Scorpion at that kind of a distance, unless you're able to pen HE. But honestly, through getting into this position and just getting all of these vehicles out, I do feel like I've already won this game. Shame that the Scorpion managed to bag me there. But we've taken this position. We've bruised our way through. We're going to load some HE shells here to hopefully get some revenge on this Scorpion. Remember that HE is so important to use in this tank when you're shooting decent distances against lightly armored tanks, and sometimes even not lightly armored tanks. Remember that this vehicle has some of the most insane damage drop-off of any of the Polish TDs. The tier 10, for example, I think it's still doing 300 at 500 meters, whereas this one's doing 200. And remember, you can hit tanks up to 500, well, you can hit tanks up to 700 meters, 720 meters in World of Tanks with a gun like this. But remember that your all-render distance is also 568, right? So your damage is probably going to go down to like about 150 or something at those kind of distances, which is just absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. So I'm going to do an AP shell switch here. Go right through the top of the T-103. I'm lucky that one managed to hit, and the Scorpion doesn't manage to catch us. So at those kind of distances, those mid-distances, the alpha damage isn't bad. It's just the extreme drop-off once you get over about like 200, 300 meters. But you've already lost like a third of your alpha damage, even when we're engaging tanks at the distance like the T-103 was there. So I'm hoping this Scorpion is just going to have a go. They've been spamming gold at us. They spam some more gold at us. But the gold bounces this time, and we punish them hard. That's like 3/4 of their tank. 795 damage dealt with my HE shell. It's actually a little bit of a low roll. The average damage here should be like 808 with the intuition. Wow, I'm not sorry with the intuition, with the shell tuning. So now, oh, this is what I'd like to see. Borsig at long range as well. And remember, no damage drop off with those HE shells. 788 damage dealt to the Borsig. Really, what I wanted to show you in this game is how important it is to use those HE shells in the right scenarios. And that's why I do feel like this tank should definitely take intuition to be able to switch out, to use the right shell for the right job. And man, this thing just flows. It does. This alpha damage is just pretty crazy. On an ISU 152, you have less gun depression in this tank. You have worse armor than this tank. I don't know why anyone would play an ISU 152 compared to this. I guess because you can actually do damage at decent distances. But as you all know, when the fighting can just be at close quarters combat, map dependent, do you really need to be dumping damage at decent distances in a tank destroyer these days? Or is it more important to just go and win the inevitable heavy and medium tank fight for the most important locations? Now I'm going to be rolling out on Empire's Border, and I want to show you that this tank, a couple of things. Number one, that it's not all great when it comes to this tank, because you'll just end up in some situations where you're playing against tanks that just are more flexible with better gun depression, and it can make this tank really awkward. However, I also want to show you that even when you get into these awkward situations, purely from the fact that this tank just hits so hard, and it does have a good amount of resilience, that it will still do okay. But darn, you know, losing that side shot to the Vipera who's pushing through with those premium rounds there, it's awkward. We're going to load around, and boom. Goodbye, TNH. Instead of rolling for our 800, which what we should have done, we actually end up rolling for 1,200 there. It's a bit of a shame that the 56 TP is going to fall, but you know, it happens in World of Tanks. The enemies outflanked us, they've outplayed us. I'm going to go for an HE shell here onto the top of the tank, and oh dear, things aren't working out for me now, that's for sure. Absolutely, utterly not working out. However, I pretty much decided that this game was going to be a loss. But sometimes in your losses, if you can still, you know, still pump out a little bit of damage, then it kind of like softens the blow. And at the end of the day, most people who are playing tier 8 premium tanks are usually trying to make credits rather than exactly have fun. I mean, hopefully you're having fun and making credits at the same time. But let's take a look to see just what we can get with the Grom. And that is a Carnarvon down. It's not even that much of a high roll. This thing could, in theory, roll up for 1,000 damage for its max roll. The Kirovets comes around the corner. We're going to put one more into the Lerva, and 800. This is still, it's still a solid game. Are we going to get one more? Can we get one more? Please, please, please. No. 2,800 damage. So I wanted to show you this game because it shows you how awkward this vehicle still is on a ridgeline when you can't make your 7 degrees of gun depression work. But even in my losses, I still did consistent amounts of damage, which would be great for your average combines and also great for making credits. So, the Grom. I want to come to an overall conclusion about this tank. Firstly, this is a very strong vehicle. I think it's a great tank. I think it'll be very strong in capable hands. I think that casual players who try and play this thing at long range will do very badly in it. They won't realize what they're doing. But aggressive players who want to go get stuck in and influence the battle early will find this is an incredible tank. Even without a turbo, it's fast, which allows you to use a durability device. And if you can't lock this thing's tracks down, how are you really meant to counter a tank that hits you for 800 damage every like 12 seconds when the vehicle's set up correctly? However, while I think that it's going to get a very good win ratio, I think this will be one of the best tier 8 tank destroyers. I think there are a few issues. Firstly, it's really boring. It's a really boring tank. Just driving in, hoping that your opponents suck, praying for a nice map and a nice matchup. This tank does really badly against tier 8 tanks with amazing gold rounds, and does badly against 9s and 10s that have regular amounts of gold pen. As soon as they get about like 300, the whole of the upper hull of the armor is not great. And remember that you've got the whole issue of the plate here when people start to figure this out, and the lower plate that people will take advantage as well. And there's nothing more frustrating than playing a bit of a whiffy, inflexible tier 8 tank destroyer against tier 9 and tier 10 tanks that your alpha damage doesn't really intimidate them as much, and they will just farm you. They'll just sit there and they'll shoot you, and then your hit points aren't going to go a long way. So you have issues in this tank when you don't get into those nice matchups. But then again, all well-armored tier 8s kind of have those issues when they don't get into nice matchups for sure. But I think my biggest problem with this tank has to be just, it's boring. It's a boring playstyle. Drive in, shoot, no turret, no flexible gun arc, not really that much gun depression, no intelligence really with the way that the armor works. Sure, if you use your 7 degrees of gun depression, you hide that lower and that mid plate, then the vehicle will do better. But it's dull. I think even something like a TS5, I feel like I'm more involved with the battle. Now, sure, a TS5 has half the alpha damage of this at close quarters combat. But the TS5 is just firing multiple times for this thing. So I feel like in a TS5, I'm just as dangerous, really. Of course, the TS5 is a lot slower, but I'd say it will be way better against tier 7 and tier 6 tanks when you're exposing your lower plate. Against a TS5, tier 6 and tier 7s are just a formality. But tier 6 and tier 7s will damage the Grom's lower plate when they're able to hit it. But 800 alpha damage, man. Storing up that alpha damage and just delivering it, it's wild. And this thing is an absolute death box of a tank getting around. So I think the Wargaming have made this vehicle a little too good. I think they should have looked at the Kalana stats and realized that the Kalana is the best tier 8 tech tree tank destroyer, and they should have made the Grom a little bit worse. I think you could have easily had 700 alpha and it would have still been a good tank. I think the fact that they've given it 800, like the tier 9 and the tier 10, and also given it that better damage per minute for close quarters combat, I think is a little bit too much. I think the Grom's going to be a little too good, but I think the saving grace of the Grom will be that it's a boring tank that not many players will actually want to play. I don't think it's as fun as playing something like the Turtle. I don't think it's as fun to play this tank as it is to play a TS5. But for everyone out there who just must have the biggest numbers possible, they're going to like it. One thing is for certain, I am definitely not looking forward to having to fight these tanks in my, should we say, more squishy, heavy vehicles. You know, T-34s, Lervas. Those tanks are going to be two-shot by this vehicle, and you're only going to get to barely reload for your second time and maybe do like 600 to 800 damage to the Grom before it reloads its shell for the second time and kills you most likely in that second hit. The idea of losing 1,600 damage in 12 seconds to a vehicle that has decent penetration and annoying kind of like armor layout that if you choke a little bit, you're going to miss a shell and you're going to feel really stupid. I'm not looking forward to playing tier 8 and tier 9 heavy tanks against this. This thing is going to farm those. However, anything at long range, on long range maps, is going to just make the Grom look stupid. It won't have enough view range to spot you. It has good camo, but not great camo when it's moving. So unless it's sitting still, they're going to be easy to be able to pick apart. And every single tier 8 tank has more alpha damage than this vehicle at 500 meters. So you can just let them shoot you at 500 meters. It doesn't matter. Really weird in those kind of scenarios about how useless the Grom will be. So all in all, the Grom, it's definitely worth getting if you are going to play actively in the mission marathon. If you complete 6, 7 stages, I think it's going to be worth a pickup. And for all of you free-to-play players out there, if you're willing to put the time in and go through all 10 of the stages, which will take you a good amount of playing over the next couple of weeks, this is going to be a fantastic pickup for all of you free-to-play players. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed my full tank review on the Grom. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about this Polish bruising premium tank destroyer. Do you think it looks too good, or do you think that it looks mediocre? And let me know in the comments down below, do you plan on getting the Grom, and how many stages are you going to try and complete? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.